Hello, bonjour, Ainin. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Lara McKendrick and I'm an Ottawa-based architect and the president of the Governing Council of the Ontario Association of Architects. That's for anybody who wasn't here in the morning, yesterday. I hope you have all been having a great conference and welcome to the 2026 Recognition and Thursday Plenary. First, I want to recognize the traditional and ancestral lands of the Haldenby Treaty on which we have the privilege of gathering. To the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Neutral First Nations, whose presence continues to enrich our communities, both culturally and spiritually, we thank you for your stewardship in helping us foster an inclusive territory on which we live, work, play, and learn. May our presence today and hereinafter be one of unity and kinship as we move forward in reconciling our history as a community and as a nation. The OAA honors the rich cultural and natural landscape our buildings and spaces are a part of, and the connection to the land Indigenous peoples have valued since time immemorial. We are grateful for Indigenous knowledge that guides us and commit to building in harmony with the land and creating sustainable spaces for generations to come. For today's plenary, we come together to first celebrate those who have made outstanding contributions to our profession and Ontario's built environment. We will then hear from architects Brian Porter of Two Row Architect and Clifford Harvey with Waterloo Regional Health Network to learn more about a truly landmark local project. And first, a very special thank you to today's sponsor, Fritz Alder Precast, whose support is greatly appreciated. The OAA is happy to have representatives from all our sponsors with us here today, and I'm grateful to be joined here on stage by the OAA's architectural graduate, Alexa Holder, because she'll be helping me with giving out these awards, and we're sad to see her go. They only get to stay 1 year, but she's got a great resume. FYI. I also want to acknowledge those newly licensed members whose names you saw scrolling, did they scroll? Behind as they coming in today. Those were the architects and licensed technologists who received their license or limited license between April 2025 and 2026. On behalf of the OAA Council and the architecture profession here in Ontario, I want to recognize these new members for their hard work and dedication in reaching this important point in their careers. I'm not sure if any of our newly licensed are here with us today, but if you are here, if you would stand, if you're able. Is anybody here? I thought I saw a couple yesterday. Oh, maybe they're just shy. Anyway, we give you a round of applause in any case. We begin this afternoon's celebration by welcoming the OAA's newest honorary member. To help recognize this individual, please welcome Bill Birdsell, a current OAA councillor and liaison to the Grand Valley Society of Architects and a past president of our association. Thanks, Bill. I'm good. Honorary membership is reserved for someone outside the OAA who has rendered valuable and distinguished service to the architectural profession or has scrupulously upheld the objects of the association. Today, we recognize Rick Haldenby, FRAIC, CM. Rick was appointed by our membership during the virtual annual general meeting last month. And Professor Haldenby has significantly advanced Canadian architectural education and heritage preservation. As a director of the University of Waterloo School of Architecture from 1988 to 2013, he founded the celebrated Rome program and fostered international collaborations, elevating the school's global reputation. In the Rome program, Waterloo architecture students study in the Eternal City for a term in their 4th year, and I'm sure many of you probably did that if you were at Waterloo, hopefully. And as most of you know, this includes field trips across Italy and completing projects in the Roman Design Studio. It's a highlight and a core program at Waterloo. An advocate for heritage design, Professor Haldenby also led the school's relocation to Cambridge, contributing to a cultural and social revitalization of that area. Inducted into the Order of Canada in 2022, his mentorship and vision have left an enduring legacy. So with that, I hand it over to Professor Haldenby, if you'd like to say a few words. You would do the certificate first? All right.
Is right. Those of you who know me know that I am not a man of few words, but I will limit myself today. On the other hand,
2 or 3 minutes.
I got that. So 2 or 3 minutes. But before I launch into my prepared remarks, I do want to welcome you to Waterloo Region. It's the first time the OAA has had its annual general meeting in its annual conference in Waterloo Region. We certainly could use better convention facilities than we have shown you today and yesterday, but you're in for a treat. We are hoping all of you, we being myself, the students at the University of Waterloo School of Architecture, and my fellow citizens in Cambridge, who essentially are the reason the School of Architecture was able to relocate to a beautiful facility in Cambridge. We would all welcome you this evening at the Gaslight District at Tapestry Hall. And we hope that if this meeting doesn't go too long, and if somebody doesn't talk too long, there will be some time, because there is an exhibit in the Gaslight District, 2 exhibits in the Gaslight District. One celebrates the work of the students who were in Rome this past year. It's called Continuum, and it's literally right above Tapestry Hall. So all you have to do is go upstairs and you can see the work and the sketchbooks of the students who were in Rome this last year. There is another exhibit there is a facility that the owners of the Gaslight District have provided for the students at the School of Architecture to run a community liaison, which we call the Bridge. And there is a lovely exhibit of first-year student work in that hall. All of them are in the same complex as Tapestry Hall, where you're going. So please, and the School of Architecture is just across the street. There are exhibits in the School of Architecture as well. We would be happy tonight, tomorrow, whenever, if you came down to visit. But let me just say these things. I am deeply grateful for this honor. Thank you to those who chose to nominate me and the Ontario Association of Architects for granting me the honorary membership in an organization to which I have been connected throughout my life. Most of you are in the room are too young to know this, perhaps, but I was actually born into architecture. My father was an architect. My grandfather was an architect. Their firm, Mathers and Haldenby, was responsible for scores of buildings in Toronto and beyond. The firm lasted through 2 generations. I am a failure in this respect. The better part of a century. Both men were leaders in the profession and played significant roles in the OAA. I literally grew up at Park Road. I vividly remember my first experience of the building, up 3 uneven steps from Park Road, through a door and onto the ramp that led from the street to the valley, from city to park, downstairs to a window. It was poetry and revelation to me. This, I thought, was what modern architecture can do. I actually had my 16th birthday party at Park Road, and I will not share the details, but they did involve substances that were not allowed at the time. And in 1969, the OAA indirectly sent me to Waterloo. My dad was the chair of the registration board at the time. One April morning, I walked a few blocks down Huron Street from my high school on Bloor Street to the U of T School of Architecture on College. Then the school was a hotbed of opposition to the OAA, this being 1969. In my interview, I encountered a wave of hostility that appeared to reflect the fact that I was regarded as the devil's spawn. In the wake of the trauma, I trudged back up Huron, determined to find another road to becoming an architect, hence Waterloo. So I moved from the center of the metropolis to the cornfields north of a suburban campus in southwestern Ontario. By the time I was finished my degrees at Waterloo, I realized that my natural home was the academy. I learned the truth of architecture by traveling on a bicycle from Greece to England in 1976, after which I returned to Waterloo to join a group of pioneers. Here we built something different and very special in a context that I came to characterize as outside the wall, fuori le mura. The first school of architecture in the country not located in a traditional metropolitan area. We thought of education and architecture differently. We believed in architecture as a form of environmental stewardship and cultural speculation. We connected to practice globally through the co-op system. We connected to the world differently. We changed locations, to Cambridge, to Rome. Waterloo Architecture was a project involving faculty, staff, and students equally. Teaching was inspiration. Students were, and continue to be, my inspiration. My colleagues as well. And then later, my wonderful and creative wife and my amazing children, they all inspire me. And I hope to do the same for them, helping my students establish a state of being which I recognize in myself when I read a biographical novel by the brilliant Indigenous writer Thompson Highway. The book and the state are called permanent astonishment. It is a condition in which I realize I have always lived, and it is why I am so proud and so moved by your generosity to me this evening. Thank you.
U of T lost and Waterloo won. Thank you, and congratulations again. Now I'd like to invite the OAA Executive Director, Kristi Doyle, to join us to present the OAA Certificates of Appreciation for past councillors.
Thank you, Lara. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here, and it's great to see everybody. I hope everybody's enjoying conference so far. On behalf of the OAA Governing Council, it is my pleasure this afternoon to acknowledge the contributions of 3 individual members who have recently completed their terms on OAA Council. These members have made really important contributions to the association, to the profession, and by extension to the people of Ontario. And I'd really like to take a moment to recognize the dedication and the commitment that it takes to be a member of council. I'd like to ask at this time Doyle to join me on stage. Doyle returned to OAA Council actually for a second term last year with a great foundation of knowledge and a passion for the work of council. As well as serving on council, Doyle contributed as a member of the Continuing Education Advisory Committee as well as an OAA trustee. Doyle always spoke with enthusiasm and conviction on key topics affecting the practice of architecture in Ontario. His focus on license-related issues and his commitment to understanding architects across Ontario was evident. Doyle, we appreciate and thank you for your contribution. Thank you. Next, I would like to recognize OAA past president, Ted Wilson, who unfortunately could not be with us here today. Ted was a dedicated member of council for the past 4 years, joining in 2022. He was thoughtful and measured in his approach. The following year, he was elected to the Executive Committee of Council, where he served 2 years as Senior Vice President and Treasurer. During this time, Ted chaired both the Finance and Audit Committee as well as the Governance Committee. He also represented the OAA as an interlocking director on the Pro-Demnity Board of Directors and also served as liaison to 4 of our societies, Algoma, North Bay, Northern Ontario, and also the Northwestern Society. As president in 2025, Ted worked to elevate the profession while prioritizing the public interest. His support for reconciliation and inclusion of both Indigenous voices helped to shape a more inclusive and a respectful pathway forward, one that will continue to influence the association for years to come. Please join me in a round of applause for Ted. And finally, I would like to recognize Marek Zawadski. Marek, if you would like to join me on stage. Marek came on to OAA Council in 2022, serving on the Complaints Committee, also the Registration Committee and the Practice Resource Committee, as well as being an OAA trustee, all while he was serving as a councillor, and he was also the liaison to the Trent Society of Architects. His ability to provide practical and thoughtful insight on complex issues has been invaluable. Marek's steady presence and willingness to work with council to address challenges facing the architectural profession will be deeply missed. Please join me in a round of applause to recognize Marek. And Laura, I'm going to hand it back to you. Don't go anywhere. Come back.
Coming back. All right. Thank you, Kristi. All right, I would like to acknowledge, next we have the awards for 2026. I'd like to acknowledge my fellow 2026 Service Award jury members who judged the submissions for this year's Best Emerging Practice, Medal of Service, and Honor Roll Awards, as well as the Lifetime Design Achievement Award that we'll celebrate later on tonight. This jury was comprised of architects Tim Wickens, Amy Lynn, and Craig Race, and our facilitator was Tamara King. And our first award this afternoon is for the OAA's Best Emerging Practice Award. And this is an award recognizing the contribution of a young firm that has been in practice for 6 years or fewer. This practice has a clear vision, well-articulated goals, and proven effective strategies that provide a competitive advantage, but also takes a thoughtful approach to employee wellness and work-life balance. The award honors a team that presents compelling examples of entrepreneurial creativity, quality, and effectiveness, and the winner of the Best Emerging Practice Award this year is Juxta Architects, Inc. And accepting the award is Stefan Zangra. As a new voice in a traditionally established sector, Juxta Architects brings fresh ideas and bold solutions to heritage conservation. The jury highlighted that what sets them apart is their ability to successfully position themselves in a highly specialized niche early on. They combine expertise in building science and building envelope technology with heritage preservation. And the Ottawa firm aims to lead by example, preserving the character of cities while actively shaping their future, and their passion for heritage is clearly reflected in their work. So the next award is the 2026 Medal of Service. This biennial award is a continuation of the 2 past OAA honors, the G. Randy Roberts Service Award and the Order of Da Vinci. It recognizes someone who has provided exceptional voluntary service and leadership to the profession and/or their community through promotion, advocacy, education, or other contributions. This can be a specific initiative or efforts over a longer period of time, either way affecting a profound impact on our profession and the public's appreciation of architecture. And this year's worthy recipient is Michael McClelland. I'm supposed to keep talking, but they're talking. For more than 30 years, Michael has been a passionate advocate for design excellence through his collaborations with countless architecture firms in the Toronto area and many more beyond. As one of the top heritage architects and advocates in the profession, he has played a key role in the revitalization of hundreds of heritage structures, integrating existing building fabric into a changing city. So, and we want to give you your award, and then you can talk. Another picture?
Thank you very much. I'm honored to get this award. I thank the jury and everyone else involved. I want to say that tonight I'm here with Rena Greer and her son Simon. Bill Greer is going to receive an award later tonight, and I think why I'm mentioning it is Bill was my mentor as an architect. And I think the profession of architecture is about mentors, about demonstrating and showing others how to do things, and you follow through and you learn from your mentors. And so I'm grateful you're here. I think it's interesting also the OA has changed over time. I was studying with Bill Greer about heritage restoration. I had a hard time filling out my logbook. The OA wouldn't accept fixing old buildings as an architect's job. And so I think what we're finding now is there's been a great change. We've actually shifted the profession dramatically. I think there's a much greater concern about the environment, the culture of our environment, the identity of our environment, and many things have changed. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I think it's great that the profession's moving that direction. I guess the other thing I'd sort of say very, very quickly, I'd say that the architecture profession is a self-regulating profession, and it's self-regulating because the profession promises that we'll look after the public good. So we have to think the public good's not just the building's not going to fall down on you, but the public good is a broader thing about the concept of what public good means and what our responsibility as architects is to look after the public good. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, and again, congratulations. We will now end this afternoon's program of honoring and awards with the presentations honoring the inductees to our honor roll. That's a lot of honoring, but which recognizes our profession, members of our profession who have deceased. These honorees are someone whose quality of work and contribution to the profession's architectural heritage are significant, or someone who has influenced our profession through design, education, or community development. And this year we have 3 architects being added to the esteemed list. The first honor roll inductee is Bill Greer. Bill Greer was a pioneer in heritage preservation in Ontario. As chief architect of the Heritage Preservation Division of the Toronto Historical Board from 1976 to 1991, he established rigorous conservation practices, saving landmark buildings and creating Toronto's first residential heritage conservation district. After retiring from this, he continued his consulting practice, contributing significantly to iconic sites and structures like the Ontario Science Centre and Queen's Park. Honored with many awards, including the OAA's 2016 Order of Da Vinci and his own namesake award from the Heritage Toronto, his legacy is one of stewardship and civic dedication. With us to accept the plaque are Bill's wife, Rena Greer, and their son, Simon. Are they here? Yeah. The second honor roll inductee is William Lobban, and I hope I pronounced that right. Bill Lobban made a lasting impact on the Waterloo region, right here, through his dedication to architecture and community service. As campus architect for the University of Waterloo, where he worked for 14 years, he played a pivotal role in the master planning and development of the campus, leaving behind buildings that continue to define its landscape. His influence extended across the region, shaping its architectural identity. Bill also served the OAA with distinction, contributing 16 years as a volunteer on the registration board. Accepting the award is Bill's son, architect Malcolm Lobban. The final 2026 honor roll inductee is Jacqueline Toy Mei Chan. Jacqueline was a visionary architect and urban designer who shaped Toronto's growth with her passion for the public realm. From her early work on transformative projects like the Canada Square Master Plan to her international contributions, including the Shard in London, Jacqueline's career spanned impactful urban design, architecture, and education. As Seneca Polytechnic's manager of design and construction, she led innovative campus projects and was known for her warmth and purpose. Her legacy is one of profound human connection, through design. Accepting the award are Jacqueline's spouse, Colin Ramdiel, and their son, Matthias. Are they here yet? Did they make it? Are you here? Great. Jacqueline wasn't there old. I should add that many of the photos you've seen on the screens today can be found in the OAA Awards book, along with more project and photographer credit information. And you can pick up a copy of the book in the lounge or at the Celebration of Excellence tonight at Tapestry Hall. With that, we now switch gears to learn about Waterloo Regional Health Network collaboration, reconciliation, and Indigenous values in the context of a local project, and do so by hearing directly from two people who know it best, Brian Porter and Cliff Harvey. Brian Porter is the principal of Two Row Architect, which operates out of the Six Nations of the Grand River First Nation and Toronto. He is a prominent business leader, designing and managing projects for First Nation communities across Canada and the United States. Brian excels in designing culturally appropriate projects while maximizing the involvement of First Nations skills and trades. His firm integrates Indigenous values into design by blending traditional knowledge with modern building technologies and promoting environmentally conscious material use. Brian will be joined by architect Cliff Harvey, the Vice President of Redevelopment at Waterloo Regional Health Network. Cliff collaboratively leads organizations through the planning, design, and implementation of capital infrastructure projects. Using design management methods, he integrates governance, strategy, project management, planning, design, and procurement to deliver impactful projects. Cliff's career includes serving as senior architect in the Ontario government, a senior hospital executive, and a practicing architect. Driven by professional curiosity and a commitment to excellence, he continually challenges himself to innovate and to stay ahead of the curve. And now I think we have to give them some chairs, so there's a little bit of a pause here before they speak. And that's it.
There we go. Do you want me to cover the learning objectives?
Cliff doesn't have his learning hours yet, so I'm going to do the objectives.
There we go. All right, so I think when the OAA announced the conference being here, Brian actually reached out to me and suggested that we do a presentation on this. I got an opportunity to work with Brian on South Niagara, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. And I'll start by saying I wish somebody had given this presentation a decade ago, because we're a decade behind. And if I feel I was around in the OAA, the council, when we were doing the green and sustainability, and we were a decade behind there too. It's caught up to us, and we need to catch up to us. So part of this learning objective here really is to think about how we can benefit, and it was said in the introduction, how we benefit from the knowledge and the wisdom of the Indigenous population, particularly towards health, towards the landscape, and towards the environment. So we want to learn about the convergence of mental, physical, spiritual, and cultural health, which is really the understanding of the cultural values that they bring. And what I want to really focus on is that we're understanding the meaningful dialogue with the Indigenous communities to make the project successful. Really want to talk about what meaningful engagement means from that perspective. And then we'll talk about the Indigenous values Brian will have from that perspective. And the last thing we'll end up with, what I absolutely love, and now being a grandfather for the third time as of yesterday, planning for the 7th generation and the importance of understanding just what we're not building today, but what we're going to build for the future and 7 generations out. That's roughly about 120 years. And the lifespan of a hospital these days is well over 120 years. So, Brian, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, no, I think, if we reproduce every 16 or 20 years or so, you're really looking at a life cycle that's about 140. That's kind of the way we've been thinking about it anyway.
All right. So this is going to be slow.
Is it cooperating?
There we go.
There you go.
So who is Waterloo Regional Health Network? If you're from this area, you would know the story a little bit better, but for those outside of Kitchener-Waterloo, the WRHN, as we affectionately call it by the acronym, is a fairly new organization. It just came into being a year ago, last April. Perfect. And that it is actually the merger of Grand River Hospital and St. Mary's General Hospital. 2 organizations came together. And I actually joined 3 years ago because the opportunity was so great to come to and lead a new project, to develop of the new hospital, where 2 organizations have come together and they will learn from each other, and you actually take the lessons and you actually build something new. You're not just building more of the same. The second thing I absolutely loved about this is the fact is that it's a partnership with the University of Waterloo. Our site is actually on the University of Waterloo's northern campus. And I was pleased to see Rick get the award today, but our conversation actually goes back almost 26 years ago when I was here at Cambridge, trying to encourage Rick to look at healthcare as a study for the university. And I can still say this, because we weren't successful at that point, but maybe we're going to be successful now because we have the university backing us on the design and planning for the new hospital. But I can really say that there are no universities in Canada that are focused on designing healthcare. It's not a program. If you go down the States, Texas A&M, Clemson, you have major universities that are doing it. We're not doing it. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned about how we actually do this successfully. On the map, you'll see there's 3 campuses, and Queens Boulevard, it was the St. Mary's. That is going to close when we open up the new university hospital. Now, one of the things about coming here is the fact is that we're actually very connected to the Indigenous populations through the treaties. And Brian, do you want to speak to the treaties?
Yeah, I think the diagram on the left shows how the location of the hospital is sort of smack dab in the middle of the Haldenby Treaty, which runs 6 miles on either side of the Grand River originally, and we were sort of bequested that land for the support that we showed the British during the independence wars. It's been chiseled away over the years. Some of the land that was sold, some of it was squatted on, but so we have a little bit left. Most of it's at Six Nations of the Grand River, which is about probably 30 miles downstream from here. There's a reserve there, and there's some small parcels in Brantford. That's all that's left, but we still consider this to be a real integral part of our traditional territory.
And I think it's really important as we talk about a building being actually built on the Haldenby track in block number 2 in Kitchener-Waterloo. The second treaty is actually a treaty that was between the Lake Treaty of 1784. What you can't really see there is it covers most of Southern Ontario. So every project that you're building in Southern Ontario is sitting on treaty land. That treaty particularly wasn't necessarily about land and acquisitions as given to it, but it's actually about hunting and fishing rights. So they still have, the Indigenous population still has the rights to look at land that we're all building on. And the kind of question sits back there, did we know that as an architectural profession? Do you know that, and do your clients know that? Because that is slowly building up as some of the discussions that are going to start to come forward. I said again, we're a decade behind. Do you want to talk about the land acknowledgement? And this is what RHN actually acknowledges. RHN has done an amazing job to address the Truth and Reconciliation. And in doing so, we have our land acknowledgement. I heard the President speak of theirs. The one thing about it is that you'll notice at the bottom is a reflection. When we ever have a meeting, be it a board meeting, be it a senior leadership meeting or a town hall meeting, we always do a reflection, because that's what Truth and Reconciliation is about, is reflecting. And I'll just really quickly say, today at the senior leadership meeting that I had before this meeting, the reflection was on cedar bass. And cedar bass are it's basically part of the cultural experience, particularly at end of life. And we're talking about how patients in the ICU can experience having a cedar bath at that point in their lives and the experience that they have. Again, we need a better job in understanding how we can accommodate that through the healthcare system. And that reflection was helpful for us because it actually taught us more about the Indigenous values that we experience with our population that come to the hospital. I'm going to go really quickly through this, just again, give you more of a perspective, because it's just not about the new hospitals. We've actually got a multi-year facility redevelopment plan. We have it built into 3 steps, and if you looked at the very bottom on the right-hand side, you'll see that it goes out to 2045. We have a comprehensive plan to address all the facilities, the new hospital, Chicopee, which is our complex care and rehab, and our Midtown Hospital, which is the Grand River Hospital. St. Mary's eventually will close, and it was St. Joseph's of Hamilton, who are the owners of the land, will turn that into accommodating post-acute care, but a continuing care for the Kitchener-Waterloo area. And the reason I pointed this out in the 3 is the fact is that this is just not about the new hospital. All our spaces will be addressing how we both provide health care, but also giving that space and understanding the Indigenous values into all our buildings, just not this one. So the last thing I'll say here, and then we'll start getting back into more of how we started the dialogue. I'll have to say, I talked about healthcare and a university and how we actually, we don't learn how to design these multi-billion-dollar hospitals. Our hospital is 1.8 million square feet. When it's eventually done in 2045, it'll be 2.8 million square feet. Those are massive buildings, but it's all standard. It's very technical, but it's all very understandable, and it's all about healthcare and lifestyle. But the one thing I didn't get at university, and I'm U of T grad, was how to meaningfully engage. We learned how to talk to clients, particularly about healthcare, but we didn't really learn how to engage around deep discussions around how you understand something that, like Indigenous values, you may not fully understand, and you have to learn that. And one of the ways that we did this, we did the South Niagara project, and we did it with this project as well, is we engaged the IAP2, so the International Association of Public Participation, to really learn how to engage and understand the methodologies. It's not all the same. And the thing I found fascinating, we actually brought our architects in, so both architects at South Niagara and for the Waterloo Hospital, to actually have a lesson. So we actually did educational sessions, so we understood what engagement goes. And what we take away from this, and if anything, this is one of to me, a key takeaway, a learning from the past, I will say 2 years, is that when we're involving and discussing with the Indigenous population, it's just not about the building. They want to talk about their health. They want to talk about health needs and health services. They do want to talk about the built environment, and they also want to talk about the site. And we're going to go now into a little more depth about that. But I would suggest the IPA2 is an amazing organization. And again, you can really learn to understand and create a very successful engagement strategy. So we're talking about the South Niagara project. And when I led that project starting in 2018, we started to engage with the Indigenous population, the Indigenous, particularly the SOHAC, the Southern Ontario Community Aboriginal Centres, I think.
Southern Ontario Aboriginal Health Access Centre.
Thank you. Yeah. So we engaged with them. We started that discussion. And you'll note on here that Turo, Brian, was actually on the winning team. But when we put together the RFP for the P3 project, we actually made a requirement to have Indigenous artists involved in the project and to bring that understanding. Brian, do you want to speak to that role there?
Yeah, there was a little bit of a slate of artists that was embedded into the PSOS, the performance spec, and it was nice to see some familiar names there, Rebecca Baird, some others, but they had sort of done the work to pre-qualify a list, which made our job, a lot easier. We ended up sort of focusing on Jay Havens, who's an Haudenosaunee artist. I think he's teaching at Waterloo these days, but had a lot of experience in some institutional installations. So it was really good fit with where we're at with the team.
Excellent. So we started, and again, as I said, I would have loved this 10 years ago because we were fumbling to try to understand how to engage, who to engage, and what their interest was. And one thing we found out really quickly is that the Indigenous population want to talk about their health. And before you want to talk about buildings, they want to talk about the health. And I do this as a service. Number one was we went and met with the traditional council of the
Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council, yeah.
And while we were talking about the new hospital project, somebody took me aside and gave me that piece of paper and said, you need to go and take a look at this. And this is from Garnet Silversmith, who unfortunately passed away in a hospital in Hamilton. And they did an inquiry to realize there was discrimination. This is 1992. That health issues were happening for the Indigenous population and not being addressed. And her request was try to get the coroner's inquiry onto the website, onto the public, because it wasn't necessarily being addressed. So before we even started to talk about building a hospital and how we can serve they need to address this. And what was interesting, I go to this is the executive summary from a final report from August of 2023. This is from South Niagara Health Services. They had a death in their emergency department. The final inquiry just happened just recently, so you might have heard about it. What's important about this was a wake-up call for Niagara Health to start to realize they needed to engage the population and their staff and create spaces that are appropriate for the Indigenous population. It took this as a wake-up call from that perspective. What I found amazing when I came to Kitchener-Waterloo was they had already started that. They didn't need to have an episode. They actually started to talk about this, and this is taken from the website on the for the Waterloo Regional Health Network, and they talk about building welcoming spaces. They talk about how that coming through the front door that they don't feel safe, they don't feel welcome. But the question is, how do you build that up? And Brian, do you want to speak a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I think we all kind of, I feel it when I walk into a space, right, where it's really not about people, it's not about place, it's not sort of celebrating its natural history. So if you can start to introduce some of that stuff into the lobbies, just to kind of like take the temperature down. Maybe there's a stronger association with some of the surrounding landscape pieces, but just to sort of, most of the entrances to hospitals are so abrupt, and they're so foreign, and they're so kind of intimidating. So we've been talking a lot about that in our working sessions, is how we can just sort of you know, see that land acknowledgement appropriate at kind of the front door. Maybe there's some patient navigators there. Familiar faces are important. But yeah, it's been something that we've been talking about since the onset, really.
And I'll just sort of go on a side note here. This is a really important aspect, and I'll go why this should be really something that we spend a lot of time as a profession trying to understand how people access health. Because it's just not the Indigenous population. A lot of new Canadians will not go to the emergency department because they come from another country, another nation that has security that they don't trust. But who's the first person when you go into an emergency department? We put our security guards at the front door. And they stop. They won't go and get access to care. And the same thing happens for the Indigenous. They will not go get access to care until the moment it becomes critical. So we're actually denying them health care by not actually creating that welcoming environment from that perspective. So the idea is that with South Niagara, we wanted to address that right from the beginning. So you'll see on the plan, sorry for the small nature of it, but we have 3 spaces particularly. We had tried to address the main entrance, the health services. So we didn't bury the Indigenous health services deep into the project. We actually brought it to the front, and we had connected a healing guard into it. So Brian, do you want to talk about some of the design here?
Yeah. One of the stories that sort of came out of the consultation was a little bit about our creation story. And if you know it, there's a hole in the sky. A sky woman falls through, so she's in distress, and the birds see her falling, and they come up and they grab a hold and they gently sort of guide her back to safe ground. So we kind of thought there was a lot in that story that was kind of analogous to the work that a lot of the healthcare staff do, right? See somebody in distress, gently take a hold of them, and kind of place them on the ground. And at the base of this, Sky Woman falls, she gets placed on the back of a turtle. So we did a bit of a kind of a turtle insignia on the ground floor into the paving pattern. This is Jay Haven's work. We're getting close now to seeing the final sort of mock-ups for the pieces, but it's central. I think it's a story that is going to ring true to the mission statement of the hospital and what they're trying to do. But to see that right at the front door, I think it's going to be a very important piece. Yeah.
You also notice in the center, just behind the wheelchair here in the rendering, is a door into the Indigenous space. Is that?
Yep, that's true. So we're right as you come in the sort of the front door. We're like the first suite on the right-hand side. So very, very accessible. This is a plan. You can see there's a lot of. We tried to make this plan as multi-purpose as we could. There's areas to prepare food. There's computer stations that are accessible. There's comfortable furniture. Right beside it, there's kind of a counseling room. So if someone's in a bed, they can actually take a bed into that space to do counseling with the family. That's one thing you see a lot with the Indigenous community is it's not uncommon for them to show up with maybe 5 or 6 people. The parents, the partner, a few of the kids. So healthcare becomes this really sort of family event. So you kind of have to prepare for a space to be kind of overcrowded. And this is the design of that central room that we came up with. There's a few references here. There's references to endangered species that are kind of at risk in the South Niagara region. The ceiling design, there's 28 of these panels that each one of them represents a day in a lunar cycle, a month, 13 months, 28 days. I don't know how our calendar ended up with 12 months, but planet Earth experiences 13 months, just in case you didn't know. And this, we didn't show up with any kind of preconceptions about what this room would be. The design came through engagement sessions with Mississaugas of the Credit representatives, some of the Indigenous staff that work with the healthcare system, Six Nations of the Grand River, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Council. We did our best to listen, and this is sort of the product that came out of that listening exercise. We were also fortunate to have the space right outside of the suite. So it was important for us to be able to sort of access that outdoor area immediately. We also we were trying to kind of avoid the fishbowl aspect too. So we wanted the convenient placement, but we didn't necessarily want everybody like coming and going, being able to see directly in if there was a ceremony going on. We wanted it to be more of a contemplative, secluded area. So this is kind of a view from it, looking at the garden. We reinstated a lot of traditional species, a focus on medicinal plants, and also some other species that are of particular significance to Six Nations of the Grand River and Mississauga as a credit. So it becomes a very sort of educational, therapeutic space.
And the last one is the...
Yeah, and we where we had to sort of create privacy, we didn't avoid sort of contemporary technology. We didn't want a space that was too nostalgic. So we ended up CNC cutting some Corten steel to kind of make the fencing that's going to separate the space, something that's, as you guys know, it sort of, rusts over time, and through the corrosion process, it builds up this resistance. But it's just I think if you took an Indigenous person from 400 years ago and you time traveled them to today, I think they'd really kind of be interested in the whole kind of CNC, using a Corten steel. Again, we don't want to be overly nostalgic. We want to use leading edge technology to create these stories and to represent these cultural narratives.
So a side note here, for anybody who does healthcare or hospital projects, one of the things you would know is that the Ministry of Health doesn't pay for art. So you'd be very creative in how you actually write your RFP through these P3 processes so that it becomes part of the requirement that they have to give you when you get the building. Because anything that's an add-on will not be paid by the Ministry of Health. But I think the thing here, the lesson is that none of this is an add-on. This is not art. This is really architecture. This is really about the space created and giving that emphasis. And I think, like Brian, from your perspective, like the project's not only on healthcare, but like being involved earlier to actually not just be an applied. There's a term in the Ministry of Health called beautification, which is just applied art, right? From that point of view, and that's the thing that they completely go, well, we don't pay for that. We pay for bricks and mortar. But by involving the architects, the Indigenous population early in, it becomes part ingrained in the project. And I think we're going to move on to the Waterloo project, but maybe you can talk about the difference between this working for South Niagara and what we're doing at Waterloo.
Yeah. There's a lot of institutions out there that they'll commission a mural, or they'll hang a portrait, or they'll place a sculpture, and that's sort of how they're checking the box to celebrate their natural history. But we like to talk about Indigenous values as a higher life form, than Indigenous representation. And to their credit, not only the firm that did the indicative design, Stantec, they understood that, but also Parkin, Adamson understood that. So we got a seat pretty early at the table, and we were really able to talk about some of these values and how that convergence of physical health, mental health, social health, cultural health, how all of those things contribute to well-being. And the landscape architect, Vertex, they sort of, lapped it up and took a lot of inspiration from it. So being able to have that seat at the table early is a lot of fun. We also pick on the engineers, right? We don't let the civil engineers use the word stormwater management. We make them say rain or rainfall. And that takes a little bit of nudging, but eventually they get it, right? And then they become the biggest kind of advocates for a lot of this way of thinking.
And so now we're going to move on to the Waterloo project, which is, again, I'll talk a little bit more about it, but I'll again point out that we're starting with a strong foundation because the Indigenous health, and this is from our website, is already part of our culture and a part of the DNA of the RHN organization and in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. There's still a lot of work to be done, and we're not finished. We do have a lot of ceremonial fires. We do have drumming circles, and I'll talk a little bit about our consultants, or our committees. But the idea there is that just actually the circle is our new strategic plan, and you'll see under the principles, truth and reconciliation is one of our principles that we still incorporated starting in 2022, but now incorporate into our strategic plan. So this is the, I was going to say, the AI enhanced site. When the consultants gave this to us, I was like, wow, that's an amazing photograph. When did you take that? When in the morning? And it was like, no, we just took Google Earth and through AI. So thank you, AI. This is, if you know Kitchener-Waterloo, just to the right is the research park, David Johnson Research Park. Just to below that, to the south, is the University of Waterloo campus. We purchased this site from the university, and I'll thank the university for that, because the university, like many nonprofit organizations, don't sell land, but they recognize the value of having the hospital on the site. And so we started with this site, particularly to start going through our master planning exercise. I've included this, and this is probably version number 3 or 4 in terms of phasing. Someday you can invite me back and I can explain construction phasing for a hospital of 1.8 million square feet, how the government cannot build that anymore. This is a side note, but 10 years ago, we opened Humber Regional Hospital and Halton's new hospital, and they were 1.6, 1.8 million square feet, built by one contractor. Today, we can't get one contractor to build 1.8 million square feet. We don't have the competition. Prices have gone up 200%, and some even and more phenomenally around it. So we have to phase this project. So when we look at this is actually, I think, Plan A or B. We're on Plan F now. We'll need some beer tonight to actually explain that in greater detail. But the one thing about the site is that it's 50 acres. And we've got a lot of pushback from the region, I'll say Kitchener-Waterloo region as a general, as a population, because why do you need 50 acres? A lot of people wanted the hospital to be downtown. A lot of people wanted it to be, different locations, but they weren't 50 acres. Why 50 acres? And this brings up the 7 generational, because we all know, particularly this is only the first phase. There's a second phase and a third phase. This hospital will be here for hundreds of years. And I've been in hospitals in Europe that are hundreds of years old, built in the 1700s, still being operated as hospitals. Because I just made that comment about how expensive this hospital is, running at about $2,000 to $3,000 a square foot to build it, we need to make sure that we are doing the right thing for the next generation and this generation, that this is not a throwaway. 50 acres is we will fill up that site fairly quickly. And I had a long discussion, I still have a discussion with the Ministry of Health, because they would like to build these buildings actually as separate buildings. They want, why can't you build 3 like little hospitals and kind of join them together? But the argument behind that is we will use up the entire site. And that's not a value, because land is very difficult to get from that perspective. So the 7 generations started to play out in exactly how we even start to think about the site and how we actually do the development from that perspective. And I'm just actually going to go back for a second, because Brian, do you want to speak about a little bit about a site? We've got some more drawings, but.
Yeah. We were really, really fortunate to walk the site pretty early, and I was immediately taken by it. To have this residential area to the north, on the north side of Berengar, but just the vistas to the south, you can kind of see for miles there. This picture really doesn't do it much justice, but there's about a 30-meter drop between Berengar and the creek that runs through at the bottom. That's, you can see the trees there. The proverbial babbling brook at the base of our site. So right away we were thinking about, how can we sort of reinstate, how can we augment these natural features? How can we kind of respect them so that the topography can some of that can show through in the final built solution? We've been talking a lot about, what's a larger contributor to healthcare, the creek or the hospital? And are there ways that we can get some of the patients out into the landscape? Are there ways that we can have fingers from the creek sort of permeate the design? So we're not there yet, but we were having these conversations, and I'm confident that, given some time, we'll be able to have those introduced. And what would be like fantastic for me is if the neighbors to the north, when they're deciding where they're going to walk their dog, that they would kind of choose to cut through the campus because of what we've done with the massing and the landscape. That'll be the real test, whether we've succeeded or not.
And do you want to get, without going too deep into names, but talk about some of the original proposals for the site and your take on it? Because I think one of the important aspects to this is also understanding being there on the site early. South Niagara, where you weren't involved in the site because we did design. It's a very traditional flat site. This one wasn't. And I think some of the lessons that we've taken from you about the site have really started to influence the design, because we've changed the design quite a bit from that perspective.
Yeah. I know at one point there was an idea about sort of starting the development on the west side and kind of moving east. And I think we've flipped that now, and we're kind of starting a little bit more east and moving west. And that was sort of critical, I think, to kind of maintaining some of those views out across the landscape and sort of giving us some time to think about how we can augment the landscape now. So when construction starts, like one of the things we're talking about doing is when you see the early works plan that we've instated here, we're talking about putting some maple saplings in so that at some point we could actually produce some syrup on the site of this facility. But we have to start that now, or it won't happen. And to the hospital's credit, they've been very, very supportive. We'll get into that a little bit more with some of the future slides, but just sort of being able to be there. Again, stormwater management has been difficult. Conventional thinking would be we would try to direct all of the stormwater to one stormwater management pond, but we're trying to do something that's a little bit more integrated, a little bit more in line with the current kind of draining systems that are on the site. So we may end up with a few stormwater management ponds as kind of teaching moments. Cascading water could become part of the experience there. But I think if it was sort of left to traditional civil engineering thinking, I don't think we'd be taking advantage of that.
Yeah. And I think it's a really important part. The fact is that we brought in Brian and Turo early into the site to start to talk about what the site wants to be, which I actually really appreciate, because 9 times out of 10, we just stick the building down. These 1.8 million square foot buildings just drop on the site. But with a 20, 30 meter drop, we really had to investigate this. The other thing that, from my perspective, that the site actually offers is the fact that it has this natural grade to it. It's very interesting from my perspective. So by taking this, we've actually learned, and we've actually done what I think is a much better scheme to actually reflect the thinking about the landscape. So again, this is KPMB, HDR are now our architects working, advancing the design, and you start to see how it actually starts to integrate into the site. It's still a big building. It's a massive hospital from that perspective, but you can start to understand how it's integrated. Is actually, again, the 3 stories. So I talked about how we started this discussion about Indigenous health. Like, how do we address the Indigenous health in this project, and how we actually go through? We talked a little bit about the built environment, how it started to reflect, how we design spaces both in South Niagara, but even in existing hospitals, you'll start to see more art showing up. So if you go into a hospital, I think pretty well now anywhere in Ontario, you'll start to see Indigenous art being put into it. Again, I call that applied art. That's not the built environment, but it brings a sense of comfort to it. But the third one is the site. This is an aspect. So again, I'll go back to meaningful engagement. If you were just traditionally going to talk to, an architect going in and talking with Indigenous population, you'd be talking about the building and a little bit about the site possibly from that point of view. But the site has taken on a much larger meaning. And part of it has to do with the treaty, recognizing the land and the value, both in terms of the natural environment. I talked about the hunting, farming, and fishing on the first, the larger treaty, and then the Haldenby from that perspective. So we really started to think about the site. These are, I do laugh because there are 4 engineering reports, and engineering reports have the most boring covers ever. But we have got, we did a climate analysis, a resiliency report to understand how the site is going to respond over the next 80 years, so up to 2080 to 2100, because this hospital is going to be there, and we do expect changes to be happening on the site. And so rainwater we expect a lot more of it. I mean, we've seen the storms that we've had. How do we work with that? We did species at risk. So when the CEO signed the purchase of the site, I said, congratulations, you've just got 50 acres, two coyotes, and about 3 dozen snakes, which we are now in the process of relocating. But to Brian's earlier comment, we're starting to think about what we need to do on the site, particularly now, before we actually start the construction. The last one is actually the archaeological site. And I'm going to go to I'll go back here. The archaeological study. We did stage 1, which identified the possibility that there were some activity on the site. We did a stage 2, which actually required us to till the land to bring up a first surface. We found a couple shards. We did a stage 3 to better understand that, and I'll speak to that in a moment. And what we discovered is that we didn't need a stage 4. Stage 4 would actually say there was habitation there. We found hunting artifacts, but we did not find any living artifacts, meaning that this wasn't a place for the Indigenous populations to camp in the past from that perspective. If we had found a stage 4, it would have changed a lot because you're not allowed to build. You have to preserve that land from that perspective. In doing so, we were actually very comfortable with this because it actually becomes part of the landscape anyways. It wasn't where the building was going to go. This is probably the part where I wish, again, 10 years ago, somebody could explain me what the duty to consult is. And if you can explain it to me, I will buy you a beer tonight. But the duty to consult is an interesting aspect of it. If you're doing any public projects with public funding, that is the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, anything, there is now becoming an increasing responsibility for the duty to consult. Just be clear, it's not the client unless you're a public organization, that is a government organization. The responsibility sits with the Crown, because this is the responsibility to respect the treaties that have and possibly make any accommodation for loss of treaties. So that aspect is actually something that the Ministry of Health is still trying to understand from that perspective. But we were trying to figure out do we have a duty to consult? And we talked to the lawyers through the Ministry of Health, our lawyers from that perspective. And again, it goes down into the small print there, but it's the duty of the Crown to do that. I think that's an important aspect of it because we're receiving public funding. There is a responsibility sitting with the government to do a duty to consult. And you'll see it And the municipal class environmental assessments, the MCEAs, which do roads and everything, they have a built-in duty to consult because it's part of the government's funding from that perspective. This is an area where we don't have a lot of insight to, but it's becoming more and more relevant to clients who get public funding and how they respond to it. I'm not an expert in it by any stretch of the imagination, but it was something that's really relevant, and this is where the Indigenous groups really want to start to speak to you. This is where the site, I remember I said it was built environment, about health, and the site. The site becomes a really important thing because it's a land that they're connected to. So this is the archaeological study that we've done. I will say it's very interesting. They found they found a couple shards with basically what we would call spearheads from that perspective. And the interesting thing about it, and why I think it's really important, is because the material that they found is not native to Southern Ontario. It's native to the Ohio Valley. So what it actually starts to do is that by collecting these and understanding, we see the migration and the patterns of the Indigenous population as they move through the land to do fishing and hunting from that perspective. So it was very informative, and it's actually going into our plans to actually do learnings on the site. Do you want to speak to?
No, it's great to sit by a client that gets it.
But I found this fascinating, right?
Yeah. The longer this project goes, the less I have to say, because like this. That's the way it's supposed to be. And I guess the further down we get, the less I have to speak.
Yeah.
That's
I'm going to make you speak now.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, we were really fortunate to be able to walk the site last year with representatives from both Six Nations of the Grand River, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and bless the site. In the four directions, there was a protocol that took place, and you'll hear us talk a little bit through this presentation about how the process oftentimes is as important or more important than whatever the deliverable happens to be. So I really want to pay some kudos to RHN. They've embraced it. They've been transparent. They've been following it in a holistic way, and it's not handcuffing the schedule. It's not handcuffing the budget. It's just kind of, if you can plan in advance, it's just the right thing to do, and it can be a lot of fun too, right? Like these walks around with a lot of laughs happening. So I don't think it's anything to really be afraid of if you can identify it early on and find the right people that you need to talk to. Open up your doors, talk to them, share some food. You really. It can be a real therapeutic exercise in and of itself.
Yeah, and we were lucky also because Elder Henry, who is he teaches and is our one of the leaders for RHN, participates in this, and he works with the University of Waterloo, is also on this journey and creating space. And the interesting thing about it is that they're going to be building a teaching center just down. Are you involved, or you have some knowledge of that?
The RFP is on the street, or kind of a land-based learning center just on the, I guess that would be the west side of Columbia Lake. That's out right now. So there's a chance that these two projects could kind of be anchors to this whole sort of educational, to a piece of curriculum along the creek.
Which is actually amazing from my perspective, because while we'll do the spiritual garden or the garden connected to the Indigenous health, having that connection in the path to a larger, I'll say it like it's health, but it's also education, right?
Yeah, that trail, the trail that runs along the creek now, it's great. You can sit there and watch people jogging, walking, wheeling, with their dogs, or it's already great. It's just going to be that much better once these two projects get executed.
So this actually goes into the approach to engagement and the phases from that perspective. And do you want to speak to the different organizations that we've engaged?
Yeah, as I was saying, we talked to Six Nations, we talked to New Credit. We've been good rapport with the Southern Ontario Aboriginal Health Access Centre, which serves kind of like the triangle sort of from Cambridge to Windsor to Owen Sound. They're sort of headquartered in London. They've been at it for a few years. They're really, really good. But also some of the service providers in the city the not-for-profit housing groups, some of the economic development guys. So we're really getting a lot of cross-pollination on a lot of the feedback we're getting. People come and they look at it from a slightly different perspective. We always sort of encourage conversation over presentation. We take notes feverishly kind of to try to capture it all. But being able to bring that cast of characters together to give feedback in a relaxed, safe way. Sometimes it's negative. We encourage that too. If there's a problem, we want to hear about it early. Oftentimes, though, they're really just kind of like shocked that they've been invited, and get a lot of. There's a lot of benefits that come through those sessions, and then we let them know that this is a process. You're going to be seeing us. You're seeing us in the talking circles at the beginning. We want to come back at schematic design. We want to come back again at 80% design development. We want you to take a look at 80% contract documents so that they can see how their words are being incorporated into the final design solution. It's also great to be able to take them on tours when the buildings are being constructed. A lot of them, they don't understand 3D like spatial relationships, so be able to take them through. It's a lot of fun to go on those construction tours. And lastly, we try to do sessions at the end at occupancy. If we do a good job, they're already thinking about how they can bring programming to the site, how they can have special events there, how they can understand that they've got equity in the project, that it's their resource. So that's when we do it right. But we have to let them know at the beginning that that's the process, and we're going to be sincere and we're going to follow it through.
And I think one of the things, a lesson learned for me, and I truly appreciate it, when we talk about engagement, you talk about the talking circles, which, as you can probably appreciate from this presentation, I like to talk. But the thing about it wasn't for me to talk, it was for me to listen. And Brian is excellent at taking tons of notes from that perspective. But do you want to talk about that? Because to me, that was a lesson learned, because we have a tendency to talk to our community instead of actually listening to them.
Well, sometimes it's not really our fault, right? Because that's the way we're trained. We're kind of trained in the university curriculum. You've got a challenge, a problem to solve. You kind of like do a deep dive for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And then, somebody's hiring you to be an expert. So you want to kind of come in and let them know how much you know. But it's hard to listen 95% of the time. And a lot of times when we go into those talking circle sessions, we'll go in with 4 or 5 purposely vague questions where there's no right or wrong answer, just to get a conversation going. And again, we try to mix those talking circles with youth, with elders, with hospital board members, and just sort of create a space where everyone feels safe, just sort of speaking freely. And I think that's sort of part of the key to the success on these things.
Yeah, I found it very informative from my perspective, because when you actually start to listen, that's where we pick up the fact is that, are they talking about the health of the community? Are they talking about the building and the environment? Or are they actually talking about the site? Because site is extremely important from that perspective. I'll shout out to Adrian from Brian's office, Turo, who put this together I think to explain to us exactly how complicated this relationship is. But you can just see how it's interconnected, because the other thing I find, and we see there's Aboriginal health centers. There's one in Toronto from that perspective. If you're engaging one a community, like the Southern Ontario, the SOHACs, there's that perspective. They're sort of organized as a community. But when you're actually doing a project of this size, you're actually engaging 3 or 4 different nations. The Grand River, you've got the Mississauga credits, and while they work together in a certain sense, they also have their interests. So it's multiple. That's why the complexity of the engagement here.
The other thing, this looks complex, and it kind of is, but what I like about it is it's fairly holistic. And if RHN wants to start training Aboriginal youth for future positions. They've got St. Mary's, they've got Midtown. They can kind of get ahead of the curve and start those programs now, and there's opportunities for that in this organization chart. If they want to try to increase Indigenous participation through construction, there's an avenues for those kind of subjects to get raised, and there's a way to kind of get buy-in from the organization to make those things happen. So it's a little bit hard to read, but if you had a chance to kind of take a look at it in detail, you'd kind of see how those connections are made through this chart.
Well, one of the reasons they included is because the slides are available after the presentation. But I'll point out the big blue on the right-hand side is the Indigenous Advisory Circles, which is part of RHN's organization to include both external and internal. So this actually is this is a more simplified portion, but we have an internal group, so our Indigenous program staff and our Indigenous employee circles. So you spoke about the fact is that we use that to better be able to provide healthcare services to the Indigenous population, but also include Indigenous in who are staff members to be able to express themselves from a cultural point of view. Again, we have ceremonial flyers on a regular basis that they can come out to both patients, family, and staff to participate. And then we have the external, which is the Indigenous Advisory Circle and the SOHAC team, and then the host nations from that perspective. And when I spoke about the fact is that it's not a single organization, it's multiple that we have to engage from that point of view. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the host nations are the treaty right holders. And so, Brian, you talked about them wanting to engage us through some of the discussion.
Yeah. The GTA is even more complicated because depending on what century you think about, the Huron-Wendat were also part of that area, so it gets even a little bit more complex. But they're ready, and as more of these projects kind of happen, it's kind of galvanizing their work too. They're starting to understand the role that they can play, the kind of influence that they can have on design. So they're getting more kind of organized and confident on their end too, which is kind of nice to see.
So in terms of like how we actually look at what we're doing, this slide is about one of the lessons learned that I had coming back. And this is a reflection I shared with our senior leadership team. Because we're walking the site, and I think later on you'll see some design principles. We're walking the site with, I think it was Mississauga credits of the First Nations, and we're walking with our consultants, our team, and our Indigenous partners. And at some point we stopped. It was a beautiful sunny day. We stopped, and the Craig, who's with Mississauga credits, said, what are the principles? What are you trying to achieve here? From a design perspective. And give her credit, particularly our landscape architect, just rhymed off the design principles like this. And I could see by his face and by his reaction, that's not what he was looking for. And I realized, and I said to him, those are our design principles. Those are the things that we created about the site. But one thing I learned, and listening to Elder Henry speak about it, is that the site that we're getting right now has been farmed for probably 150 years. University of Waterloo used it to dump all their clean fill from all their other projects that they've built over the years. So it's got a bunch of non-native soil on it. And I said to Craig, the issue that we have right now, the principle we're trying to do is we're actually trying to restore the land. We're trying to return the land back to what it was. We're trying to heal the land. Because what I've learned from Elder Henry is that you have to heal the land before you can heal yourself. And that's when Craig said, yes, that's exactly it. That's what we're trying to do here. And so we're trying to return the land because we can't provide health care if we're providing it on a site that itself is unhealthy. And that's why that connection to the landscape is so important to us, because that's that connection, Brian, you talked about it. And that's what you brought to the project. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that connection?
Yeah, and we've, like as Cliff said, he's been able to tour hospital sites in Europe and some of these places where, the specific siting really had a chance to influence the design of a hospital. And, we were looking at this site thinking it's such a fantastic resource. And, how can we align the phases? How can we sort of create ecosystems that can contribute to health? There's this thing we talk about, all our relations. So that would be the trees, the wind, the flora, the fauna, the birds, the bees, the insects, all those things that deserve to occupy the site as much as we people do. If we can reinstate some of that, create habitat for them, then we're actually kind of like contributing to our own healing by creating that environment. So that's the way we've been talking about the site quite a bit. And again, we've got some early work started so we can show Kitchener, Waterloo, the Indigenous communities that we're kind of sincere about this and getting ahead of it.
I like the loss, and again, these are things that we heard through the talking circles, but one of the things is how can we shift from placemaking to placekeeping? Because we have a tendency to think that we come into a site and we're going to clean it up. That was our first version, I think, of the building that just kind of took over the site completely, didn't really matter about the topography. It was dropped on at 1.8 million square feet. And then we started talking about how do we keep the place that it is, right? And I think that, again, that was a huge lesson for us, but that was brought through the Indigenous engagement.
Yeah, people talk a lot about placemaking, right? But all of these construction sites that we're working on, they've been places for us for 30,000 years. And oftentimes, those natural histories don't get recorded, they don't get celebrated, they don't get kind of acknowledged. So there's a place already there.
Which I think is amazing, because then it starts to take back that idea that walk the site, what does it want to be from that perspective? And so I talked about, I'll just skip over this one, but this is where we have our design themes. This is where it's come out particularly from the idea that we can round these off, but are these really important, particularly from the Indigenous engagement from that point of view? You're smiling, so you want to say something?
No, I'm just saying it's interesting to see them sort of put side by side like that, so you can kind of make a direct comparison.
And by the way, the design principles there, I believe, came from Mississauga credits of the First Nation. So, again, you have this kind of connection between what I'll say is very much Western medicine type of approach to healthcare versus actually the placekeeping that we're talking about. This is, I think, the slide you were talking about, how we do that connection up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can kind of see the sort of the green strip, and there's the creek kind of runs through. And this is some of the places where we've been able to get Guyana, say, from Six Nations there, an operation that does, they eradicate invasive species, they propagate and plant, they reinstate indigenous species. So we were fortunate to be able to contract them to come in, get rid of the buckthorn, get rid of the Phragmites, and soon there'll be a planting program where we're going to start to kind of augment, enhance, fill in some of the gaps from some of the existing species that are there. And again, I think, again, that trail is active, and I think this is going to just sort of add to the curriculum of that trail. We'll put signage up so people can kind of understand what varieties are there, what their traditional uses were for. So I think it's going to be a great space in advance of the bigger sort of construction phases that are about to come. You can see these green arrows that we're showing kind of getting kind of up into the site. We really kind of see those as ecological corridors. Again, the model that Cliff showed earlier, it's not there yet, but I think it's moving in that direction. HDR, KPMB, they're enthusiastic. We'll get to it. It'll get better. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's the whole thing too. Is it's always very. One thing I've always believed in is doing a certain amount of work and then actually stopping, reflecting on it, and bringing a third party in to take a look at it. We have a tendency, particularly in hospitals, to wait around till the ministry says go, and then you just completely rush through it and you never have a time to think about it. But the way we've set the process up is that we keep going to each stage. So a big shout out to the WRHN organization, because they're actually funding this stage of planning. The ministry hasn't given us an approval to go to this level of planning, but if we didn't do it now, the lessons that we're learning would never have been learned from that point of view. So I stress that. It's unorthodox because we are funding this work, but again, we expect the ministry to be able to support us. So again, I think, Brian, more of the...
Yeah, this is just kind of a zooming in to some of the opportunities that we're looking at creating, some pauses along the way. There's some notes on this on specific species. So some of these rest areas are going to be designed to kind of flourish in different seasons. There'll be one where there's kind of a focus on winter and how can we introduce bright colors into sort of a winter kind of garden. Other areas are going to flourish kind of in the spring. Some are going to be associated with some of the wetland terrains that are around. So we're trying to see what's there. How can we augment it? How can we support it? How can we help it? So that's sort of the tact we took with this landscape plan that we've been working with Stantec on this piece.
Now, the thing that probably isn't yet jiving with the discussion is that this is actually a work that we want to do today. So everything that Brian talked about is work that we want to start next spring. And the reason why we want to start it is because, again, lesson learned. I'm walking, this time I think it's with the Six Nation. We're walking the site, and this is the fall, and we're working in the middle of it. And I know in the middle we have what is a lot of basically invasive species, weeds, trees from that perspective. But what we have is a lot of milkweed. And we're having this discussion, and we start noticing the monarchs. I don't know if they're sitting right on the edge of an endangered species, the monarch butterflies. And what we will realize is, again, talking about the health, if we're not going to be taking care of the health of the site, how do we take care of the health of the population? So if traditionally we would go in and we would just basically bulldoze and get rid of and shrub the entire site to get it ready for the building, we would be then taking away the habitat of the monarch butterfly. And we're sitting with First Nations and we're having this discussion, and what we realize is that if we can start to repopulate the milkweed now and start to generate this landscape now, by the time we move into the hospital, it will be mature. It won't be fully mature, but it'll be mature because we'll be moving in another 8-9 years. So the idea is to actually replicate and start to rebuild a native landscape, so talking about placekeeping, on the site, so that the monarch butterflies won't basically have a habitat taken away from them completely, so that we can build a healthcare facility. But it has a double duty because it actually returns the landscape to the trail. And I will say, you'll see on the slide there that it's called, there's a particular acronym for it, but basically it's a biodiversity net gain that the UK has brought in. And their healthcare projects is that they have to return 10% more of the land to their sites. So not only can they not just basically eradicate the site, they actually have to put 10% more back into it. So it's a biodiversity net gain. That's what we're trying to achieve. We're actually trying to build a bigger biodiversity here. So this is actually a policy from the UK. It's not a policy in Ontario, but something we're trying to do from that perspective. So again, this is something we want to do this fall, do next spring to start this. Then we can then actually go in and start to grub and take down the actual plants. Brian, I think this is the eradication of the trees.
Yeah, these are the guys out on site this spring, taking down the buckthorn.
So I think we're getting to the end.
To the end, yeah.
So because we wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions from that point of view, so I'm just going to be there. If you have any questions from about the WRHN or the organization about the project, there's our redevelopment site from that point of view, or the email. We have about 9 minutes left for any questions, but I will say there's a second part about this. Brian made reference to the work that's going on in Six Nations, but there's another big chunk of work that is about to happen that has to do with the construction of the project. So hopefully in the future, another conference will come back and speak to it, because we're looking at skilled trade development and how to involve the Indigenous population in skilled trade to actually populate for this. This is actually a requirement from the Ontario government. And it's actually part of the idea is that it's actually a measure that the RFP has to go. And if you do go to Ellis Don's website or PCL's website, they have the programs already. So we're actually just tapping into this. So these things are all happening now. So Brian, any last words as we open it up?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. So is there any questions out there? Or because we are standing between you and drinking, so not that I mentioned beer 3 times already. Is there any questions? Otherwise, I'll be around tonight. And again, if you can explain duty to consult to me, I'll be buying you a beer. Good? Okay, thank you.
Use this one? No. Yeah? Okay. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Cliff. That was great. I heard you use the words lesson learned a lot, and our journey towards reconciliation is just as much about educating ourselves as it is about action. So thank you for that. Lots of lessons learned. Again, thanks for the wonderful session. Just before everybody gets up and leaves, for those of you that are joining us tonight at Tapestry Hall, if you need a bus ride, there are going to be buses leaving from here shortly. There's one bus that's going to the Delta. So if you're going back to the hotel, that will be one bus. Make sure you get on the right bus. And then I think there's 3 buses that are going down to Tapestry, and they'll be leaving momentarily, well, as soon as they're full. So we'll clear the room. So if you do need the bus, please go over to the conference center. And there will be transfers back here and also back to the Delta between 9 and 11:15. They'll go on a rotating schedule from Tapestry Hall. So again, back here, but also to the Delta. I hope to see everybody tomorrow back here. We've got closing plenary in this very room, so have a great evening, everybody.